But we do have some housing stock issues, and we need some recommendations, to tell you the truth, for what to do about it. What can we do? Because what we've been doing has not been working. You can tell.
Tuesday, March 8th. The City of Manhattan, along with Development Strategies, hosted the second Workforce Housing Initiative meeting. Development Strategies presented the data they collected over the past few months. What they found might surprise you.
Money, money, money in my pocket.
Just like many in the US, renters in Manhattan are finding it exceedingly difficult to pay for rent. They found that in order to afford a 2-bedroom apartment along with utilities, one must earn a minimum of $17.50 an hour. This is vastly different from the state and federal's minimum wage of $7.25. Grocery store clerks with a base pay of $11.50 an hour and home health aid workers with a base pay of $12 per hour still make nowhere near $17.50. The median price for a new home in Manhattan is $329,000. But the median household income is $51,000 a year, which would imply that the same household could only afford about $160,000 to $180,000 home. 51% of renters and 18% of homeowners are cost burdened, which means they're spending at least 30% or more of their income on housing costs. Between Gary, Pottawatomie, and Riley County, there are over 2,000 households, or 1 in 12 renters, that owe a combined $9 million in back rent. This has all of a sudden become much worse when you consider transportation costs with rising gas prices, costs of food with increasing inflation, healthcare costs, education, and other needs.
I'm riding high, but I've got a feeling I'm falling for nobody else but you. You caught my eye, and I've got a feeling I'm falling. Show me the ring.
So you may have noticed some rough-looking housing around Manhattan, or even lived in one. Which would make sense because 66% of all rental housing in Manhattan has been rated by the Riley County Assessor to be below average. This isn't that all surprising, considering, unlike Lawrence, Manhattan doesn't require landlords to inspect their properties. And renters are suffering because of it.
But wait, there's more.
That wasn't everything that was discussed at the meeting. Development Strategies also mentioned that, just like you, Manhattan is special. Manhattan is a landlocked city. Due to surrounding geographic features, the Blue River to the east, the Kansas River to the south and southeast, the Kansas Board of Regents land to the north and northwest, and Fort Riley to the west make expansion infeasible. Also, the rate of enrollment for K-State has declined 10.6% from 2010 to 2021. Despite this, Manhattan is still a city of renters. 57% of Manhattan residents rent their home. 80% of non-white households are renters. Because of this, it is likely that people of color disproportionately face housing cost burdens. And lastly, Manhattan has a vacancy rate of 10.6% for rental housing. These were just all the highlights. There's much more information on the Housing Snapshot report. You can access this report by going to the link in the description below, and you can find this document and others right here. So knowing what we know now, how can we improve housing in Manhattan? There were a couple interesting ideas presented at the meeting. One that everybody could agree on is that the poor housing conditions must be fixed and brought to acceptable conditions. Unfortunately, two very important questions were not asked at the meeting. How did housing conditions in Manhattan get this bad? Once homes are repaired, renovated, and redeveloped, how do we ensure these homes retain their quality so that we don't have to come back to the very same situation that we are in right now, with most rental housing conditions being below average? In terms of housing affordability, higher density and cooperative housing were mentioned. Higher density is something I would love to explain more in another video, as there's a lot to talk about, because higher density in the US is very different from higher density in other countries. I'll also be sure to make a separate video on cooperative housing, as that's another major topic to talk about. Let's do a quick recap. Renters in Manhattan are having trouble paying for below average housing if they can afford it at all. This is not good. Development Strategies presented the same information to the city commissioners. I put a link below so you can watch the entire meeting on your own if you'd like. Here's a few interesting clips from that meeting.
I don't think it's the city's place to get ourselves into the business of telling developers, well, yeah, somehow, if they can, especially if there's demand and they can sell them for $250,000, there's no reason to build houses that sell for $220,000 that they don't make very much money on. So yeah, it's a heck of a conundrum, because I just don't see how, I've always thought if there's some free market solution to this thing, that's what I want.
For those of you who may not know, a free market is an economic system that allows supply and demand to regulate prices, wages, rather than government policy. Free market should concern you as a renter. It's great for landlords and developers, but as a renter, the lack of public involvement results in less freedom and democracy for you, since an individual or a corporation is making all the decisions on how Manhattan is developed and how land is maintained and operated. Some of the most important aspects of our society are not free market, such as parks, roads, and our fire department, just to name a few. But I'll talk more about freedom and democracy in housing in the cooperative housing video. It's also important to note that developing solutions to a rental housing problem that's already mostly free market is severely limited when you look at that through that free market lens, because the only solutions to these issues is less public involvement. And you'll notice that that's a reoccurring theme in this meeting.
And lower taxes, so the tax rates is also part of the reasons for, the unaffordable costs.
Special taxes, of course, special tax structure.
And also you hear a lot about
The landlords, and I talked to a number of landlords, a lot of the landlords, especially a lot of the bigger landlords. We're saying we don't have affordable housing, but yet we have a high vacancy and people who don't feel like they can increase their costs. And in fact, what they say is, we've had new units coming into town, and it's like they lose people to those new units, even though the new units are more expensive, because lowering their price doesn't help, because people want the new units.
Lowering their price doesn't help.
We have a high vacancy and people who don't feel like they can increase their costs, because lowering their price doesn't help, because people want the new units.
Lowering their price doesn't help.
I'm not an economist, but I think if you have empty, vacant homes and you have homelessness in your city, lowering prices might help a little bit. I mean, it's better than nothing. At least the homes aren't vacant and there's somebody paying some sort of rent. But that's enough of what I think. What do you think? What do you think about Development Strategies' presentation and all the information that they've shared with us? Do you think we should be doing the same thing we've always been doing, or do you think it's time to try something different? Hey, thank you for watching. Renters Together MHK is a platform and an organization for renters by renters. The purpose of this group is to share knowledge, experiences, and to vocalize the needs and desires of renters in Manhattan, while also fighting for a more just housing system. And we're not alone. There are other renter organizations across Kansas, like Renters Together LFK, Rent Zero Kansas, and KC Tenants. If you would like to support us, it's as simple as sharing this video. If you'd like to get involved, message us on Facebook or Twitter. We'd love to hear from you.